This is a volume of fairy tales and folk tales from the Cossack people, compiled and translated by Robert Nisbet Bain. The tales are special as most children will not have heard them 100 times before, and as they take listeners into a different region of the realm of the fairy tale. The Cossacks are a group of people living mostly in what is now Ukraine and Russia. The fairy and folk tales contained in this volume allow a glimpse into both the cultural traditions of the Cossack people, as well as into how this culture was perceived by others.
Section 6 of Cossack Fairy Tales. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Vampire and St. Michael. Once upon a time, in a certain village, there lived two neighbors. One was rich, very rich, and the other so poor that he had nothing in the world but a little hut, and that was tumbling about his ears. At length things came to such a pass with the poor man that he had nothing to eat and could get work nowhere. Full of grief, he bethought him what he should do. He thought, and at last he said, "Look ye, wife, I'll go to my rich neighbor. Perchance he will lend me a silver rouble. That, at any rate, will be enough to buy bread with." So he went. He came to the rich man. "Good health to my lord," cried he. "Good health. I have come on an errand to thee, dear little master." "What may thine errand be?" inquired the rich man. "Alas! I would to God that I had no need to say it. It has come to such a pass with us, that there's not a crust of bread nor a farthing of money in the house. So I have come to thee, dear little master. Lend us but a silver rouble, and we will be ever thankful to thee, and I'll work myself old to pay it back." "But who will stand surety for thee?" asked the rich man. "I know not if any man will, I am so poor. Yet, perchance, God and St. Michael will be my sureties." And he pointed at the icon in the corner. Then the icon of St. Michael spoke to the rich man from the niche and said, "Come now, lend it him and put it down to my account. God will repay thee." "Well," said the rich man, "I'll lend it to thee." So he lent it, and the poor man thanked him and returned to his home full of joy. But the rich man was not content that God should give him back his loan by blessing him in his flocks and herds, and in his children, and in his health, and in the blessed fruits of the earth. He waited and waited for the poor man to come and pay him back his rouble, and at last he went to seek him. "Thou son of a dog," he shouted before the house, "why hast thou not brought me back my money? Thou knowest how to borrow, but thou forgettest to repay." Then the wife of the poor man burst into tears. "He would repay thee indeed if he were in this world," said she, "but lo, he died but a little while ago." The rich man snarled at her and departed, but when he got home he said to the icon, "A pretty surety thou art." Then he took St. Michael down from the niche, dug out his eyes, and began beating him. He beat St. Michael again and again, and at last he flung him into a puddle and trampled on him. "I'll give it thee for standing me surety so scurvily," said he. While he was thus abusing St. Michael, a young fellow about 20 years old came along that way and said to him, "What art thou doing, my father?" "I am beating him, because he stood surety and has played me false. He took upon himself the repayment of a silver rouble, which I lent to the son of a pig, who has since gone away and died. That is why I am beating him now." "Beat him not, my father. I'll give thee a silver rouble, but do thou give me this holy image." "Take him if thou wilt, but see that thou bring me the silver rouble first." Then the young man ran home and said to his father, "Dad, give me a silver rouble." "Wherefore, my son?" "I would buy a holy image," said he, and he told his father how he had seen that heathen beating St. Michael. "Nay, my son, whence shall we, who are so poor, find a silver rouble to give to him who is so rich? Nay, but give it me, Dad." And he begged and prayed till he got it. Then he ran back as quickly as he could, paid the silver rouble to the rich man, and got the holy image. He washed it clean and placed it in the midst of sweet-smelling flowers, and so they lived on as before. Now this youth had 3 uncles, rich merchants, who sold all manner of merchandise, and went in ships to foreign lands, where they sold their goods and made their gains. One day, when his uncles were again making ready to depart into foreign lands, he said to them, "Take me with you." "Why wouldst thou go?" said they. "We have wares to sell. But what hast thou?" "Yet take me," said he. "But thou hast nothing." "I will make me lathes and boards, and take them with me," said he. His uncles laughed at him for imagining such wares as these, but he begged and prayed them till they were wearied. "Well, come," they said, "though there is naught for thee to do, only take not much of these wares of thine with thee, for our ships are already full." Then he made him lathes and boards, and put them on board the ship, took St. Michael with him, and they departed. They went on and on. They sailed a short distance, and they sailed a long distance, till at last they came to another tsardom and another empire. And the Tsar of this tsardom had an only daughter, so lovely that the like of her is neither to be imagined nor divined in God's fair world, neither may it be told in tales. Now this Tsarina one day went down to the river to bathe, and plunged into the water without first crossing herself, whereupon the evil spirit took possession of her. The Tsarina got out of the water, and straightway fell ill of so terrible a disease that it may not be told of. Do what they would, and the wise men and the wise women did their utmost, it was of no avail. In the few days she grew worse, and died. Then the Tsar, her father, made a proclamation that people should come and read the prayers for the dead over her dead body, and so exorcise the evil spirit, and whosoever delivered her was to have half his power and half his tsardom. And the people came in crowds, but none of them could read the prayers for the dead over her. It was impossible. Every evening a man went into the church, and every morning they swept out his bones, for there was naught else of him remaining. And the Tsar was very wrath. "All my people will be devoured," cried he, and he commanded that all the foreign merchants passing through his realm should be made to read prayers for the dead over his daughter's body. "And if they will not read," said he, "they shall not depart from my kingdom." So the foreign merchants went one by one. In the evening a merchant was shut up in the church, and in the early morning they came and found and swept away his bones. At last it came to the turn of the young man's uncles to read the prayers for the dead in the church. They wept and lamented and cried, "We are lost! We are lost! Heaven help us!" Then the eldest uncle said to the lad, "Listen, good simpleton. It has now come to my turn to read prayers over the Tsarina. Do thou go in my stead and pass the night in the church, and I'll give thee all my ship." "Nay, but," said the simpleton, "what if she tear me to pieces too? I won't go." But then St. Michael said to him, "Go and fear not. Stand in the very middle of the church, fenced round about with thy laths and boards, and take with thee a basket full of pears. When she rushes at thee, take and scatter the pears, and it will take her till cock-crow to pick them all up. But do thou go on reading thy prayers all the time, and look not up, whatever she may do." When the night came, he took up his laths and boards and a basket of pears, and went to the church. He entrenched himself behind his boards, stood there, and began to read. At dead of night there was a rustling and a rattling. "O Lord, what was that?" There was a shaking of the bier. Bang! Bang! And the Tsarina arose from her coffin and came straight toward him. She leapt upon the boards and made a grab at him and fell back. Then she leapt at him again, and again she fell back. Then he took his basket and scattered the pears. All through the church they rolled, she after them, and she tried to pick them up till cock-crow, and at the very first cock-a-doodle-doo, she got into her bier again and lay still. When God's bright day dawned, the people came to clean out the church and sweep away his bones. But there he was, reading his prayers, and the rumor of it went through the town, and they were all filled with joy. Next night it was the turn of the second uncle, and he began to beg and pray, "Go thou, simpleton, in my stead. Look now, thou hast already passed a night there. Thou mayst very well pass another, and I'll give thee all my ship." But he said, "I won't go. I am afraid." But then St. Michael said to him again, "Fear not, but go. Fence thee all about with thy boards, and take with thee a basket of nuts. When she rushes at thee, scatter thy nuts, and the nuts will go rolling all about the church, and it will take her till cock-crow to gather them all up. But do thou go on reading thy prayers, nor look thou up, whatever may happen." and he did so. He took his boards and the basket of nuts, and went to the church at nightfall and read. A little after midnight, there was a rustling, and an uproar, and the whole church shook. Then came a fumbling round about the coffin. Bang! Bang! Up she started, and made straight for him. She leapt and plunged. She very nearly got through the boards. She hissed like seething pitch, and her eyes glared at him like coals of fire. But it was of no use. He read on, and didn't once look at her. Besides, he scattered his nuts, and she went after them and tried to pick them all up till cock-crow. And at the first, cock-a-doodle-doo, she leapt into her coffin again and pulled down the lid. In the morning the people came to sweep away his bones, and lo, they found him alive. The next night he had to go again in the third uncle's stead. Then he sat down and cried and wailed, "Alas, alas! What shall I do? 'Twere better I had never been born." But St. Michael said to him, "Weep not, 'twill all end happily. Fence thyself about with thy boards, sprinkle thyself all about with holy water, incense thyself with holy incense, and take me with thee. She shall not have thee. And the moment she leaves her coffin, do thou jump quickly into it, and whatever she may say to thee, and however she may implore thee, let her not get into it again until she says to thee, 'My consort.'" So he went. There he stood in the middle of the church, fenced himself about with his boards, strewed consecrated poppy seed all around him, incensed himself with holy incense, and read and read. About the middle of the night a tempest arose outside, and there was a rustling and a roaring, a hissing and a wailing. The church shook, the altar candelabra were thrown down, the holy images fell on their faces. "O Lord, how awful!" Then came a bang! Bang! From the coffin, and again the Tsarina started up. She left her coffin and fluttered about the church. She rushed at the boards and made a snatch at him, and fell back. She rushed at him again, and again she fell back. She foamed at the mouth, and her fury every instant grew worse and worse. She dashed herself about, and darted madly from one corner of the church to the other, seeking him everywhere. But he skipped into the coffin, with the image of St. Michael by his side. She ran all over the church, seeking him. "He was here, and now he is not here!" cried she. Then she ran farther on, felt all about her, and cried again, "He was here, and now he's not here!" At last she sprang up to the coffin, and there he was. Then she began to beg and pray him, "Come down! Come down! I'll try and catch thee no more, only come down! Come down!" But he only prayed to God, and answered her never a word. Then the cock crew once. "Cock-a-doodle-doo!" "Alas! Come down! Come down! My consort!" cried she. Then he came down, and they both fell on their knees and began praying to God, and wept sore and gave thanks to God, because he had had mercy on them both. And at the dawn of day crowds of people, with the Tsar at the head of them, came to the church. "Shall we find him reading prayers, or shall we only find his bones?" said they. And lo, there they both were, on their knees praying fervently to God. Then the Tsar rejoiced greatly, and embraced both him and her. After that they had a grand service in the church, and sprinkled her with holy water, and baptized her again, and the unclean spirit departed from her. Then the Tsar gave the young man half his power, and half his kingdom. But the merchants departed in their ships, with their nephew on board. They lived together, and time went on, and the young man still remained a bachelor, and was so handsome that words cannot describe it. But the Tsar lived alone with his daughter. She, however, grew sadder and sadder, and was no longer like her former self, so sorrowful was she. And the Tsar asked her, saying, "Wherefore art thou so sorrowful?" "I am not sorrowful, father," said she. But the Tsar watched her, and saw that she was sorrowful, and there was no help for it. Then he asked her again, "Art thou ill?" "Nay, dear dad," said she. "I myself know not what is the matter with me." And so it went on, till the Tsar dreamt a dream, and in this dream it was said to him, "Thy daughter grieves because she loves so much the youth who drove the unclean spirit out of her." Then the Tsar asked her, "Dost thou love this youth?" And she answered, "I do, dear father." "Then why didst thou not tell me before, my daughter?" said he. Then he sent for his heyduks and commanded them, saying, "Go this instant to such and such a kingdom, and there ye will find the youth who cured my daughter. Bring him to me." Then they went on until they found him, and he took just the same laths and boards that he had had before, and went with them. The Tsar met him, and bought all his boards, and when they split them in pieces, lo, they were full of precious stones. Then the Tsar took him to his own house, and gave him his daughter, and they lived right merrily together. End of Section 6.
Section 7 of Cossack Fairy Tales. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The story of Tremsin, the bird Tsar, and Nastasia, the lovely maid of the sea. There was, once upon a time, a man and a woman, and they had one little boy. In the summertime, they used to go out and mow corn in the fields, and one summer, when they had laid their little lad by the side of a sheaf, an eagle swooped down, caught up the child, carried him into a forest, and laid him in its nest. Now in this forest 3 bandits chanced to be wandering at the same time. They heard the child crying in the eagle's nest. "Oh, oh, oh!" So they went up to the oak on which was the nest and said to one another, "Let us hew down the tree and kill the child." "No," replied one of them, "it were better to climb up the tree and bring him down alive." So he climbed up the tree and brought down the lad, and they nurtured him and gave him the name of Tremsin. They brought up Tremsin until he became a youth, and then they gave him a horse, set him upon it, and said to him, "Now go out into the wide world and search for thy father and thy mother." So Tremsin went out into the wide world and pastured his steed on the vast steppes, and his steed spoke to him and said, "When we have gone a little farther, thou wilt see before thee a plume of the bird Tsar. Pick it not up, for sore trouble will be thine." Footnote: Tsar, i.e., burning bright. End of footnote. Then they went on again. They went on and on, through 10 tsardoms they went, till they came to another empire, in the land of the thrice 10, where lay the feather. And the youth said to himself, "Why should I not pick up the feather when it shines so brightly, even from afar?" And he went near to the feather, and it shone so that the like of it cannot be expressed, or conceived, or imagined, or even told of in tales. Then Tremsin picked up the feather, and went into the town over against him. And in that town there lived a rich nobleman. And Tremsin entered the house of this nobleman, and said, "Sir, may I not take service with thee as a laborer?" The nobleman looked at him, and, seeing that he was comely and stalwart, "Why not? Of course thou mayest," he said. So he took him into his service. Now this nobleman had many servants, and they curried his horses for him, and made them smart and glossy against the day he should go a-hunting. And Tremsin began to curry his horse likewise, and the servants of the nobleman could not make the horses of their master so shining and bright as Tremsin made his own horse. So they looked more closely, and they perceived that when Tremsin cleaned his horse, he stroked it with the feather of the bird Tsar, and the coat of the good steed straightway shone like burnished silver. Then those servants were filled with envy, and said among themselves, "How can we remove this fellow from the world? We'll saddle him with a task he is unable to do, and then our master will drive him away." So they went to their master and said, "Tremsin has a feather of the bird Tsar, and he says that if he likes he can get the bird Tsar itself." Then the nobleman sent for Tremsin and said to him, "O Tremsin, my henchmen say that thou canst get the bird Tsar if thou dost choose." "Nay, but I cannot," replied Tremsin. "Answer me not," said the nobleman, "for sure as I have a sword, I'll slice thy head off like a gourd." Then Tremsin fell a-weeping and went away to his horse. "My master," he said, "hath given me a task to do what will clean undo me." "What task is that?" asked the horse. "Why, to fetch him the bird Tsar." "Why, that's not a task, but a trifle," replied the horse. "Let us go to the steps," it continued, "and let me go a-browsing. But do thou strip thyself stark naked and lie down in the grass, and the bird Tsar will straightway swoop down to feed. So long as she only claws about thy body, touch her not. But as soon as she begins to claw at thine eyes, seize her by the legs." So, when they got to the wild steppes, Tremsin stripped himself naked and flung himself in the grass, and immediately the bird Tsar swooped down and began pecking all about him. And at last she pecked at his eyes. Then Tremsin seized her by both legs and mounted his horse and took the bird Tsar to the nobleman. Then his fellow servants were more envious than ever, and they said among themselves, "How shall we devise for him a task to do that cannot be done, and so rid the world of him altogether?" So they bethought them, and then they went to the nobleman and said, "Tremsin says that to get the bird Tsar was nothing, and that he is also able to get the thrice lovely Nastasia of the sea." Then the nobleman sent again for Tremsin and said to him, "Look now, thou didst get for me the bird Tsar. See that thou now also gettest for me the thrice lovely Nastasia of the sea." "But I cannot, sir," said Tremsin. "Answer me not so," replied the nobleman, "for sure as I've a sword, I'll slice thy head off like a gourd, and thou bring her not." Then Tremsin went out to his horse and fell a-weeping. "Wherefore dost thou weep?" asked the faithful steed. "Wherefore should I not weep?" he replied. "My master has given me a task that cannot be done." "What task is that?" "Why, to fetch him the thrice lovely Nastasia of the sea." "Oh," laughed the horse, "that is not a task, but a trifle. Go to thy master and say, 'Cause white tents to be raised by the seashore, and buy wares of sundry kinds, and wine, and spirits in bottles and flasks, and the thrice lovely Nastasia will come to purchase thy wares, and then thou mayest take her.'" And the nobleman did so. He caused white tents to be pitched by the seashore, and bought kerchiefs and scarves, and spread them out gaily, and made great store of wine and brandy in bottles and flasks. Then Tremsin rode toward the tents, and while he was on his way, his horse said to him, "Now, when I go to graze, do thou lie down and feign to sleep. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia will appear and say, 'What for thy wares?' But do thou keep silence. But when she begins to taste of the wine and the brandy, then she will go to sleep in the tent, and thou canst catch her easily and hold her fast." Then Tremsin lay down and feigned to sleep, and forth from the sea came the thrice lovely Nastasia, and went up to the tents and asked, "Merchant, merchant, what for thy wares?" But he lay there and moved never a limb. She asked the same thing over and over again, but, getting no answer, went into the tents where stood the flasks and bottles. She tasted of the wine. How good it was! She tasted of the brandy. That was still better. So, from tasting, she fell to drinking. First she drank a little, and then she drank a little more, and at last she went to sleep in the tent. Then Tremsin seized the thrice lovely Nastasia and put her behind him on horseback, and carried her off to the nobleman. The nobleman praised Tremsin exceedingly, but the thrice lovely Nastasia said, "Look now, since thou hast found the feather of the bird Tsar, and the bird Tsar herself, since also thou hast found me, thou must now fetch me also my little coral necklace from the sea." Then Tremsin went out to his faithful steed and wept sorely, and told him all about it. The horse said to him, "Did I not tell thee that grievous woe would come upon thee if thou didst pick up that feather?" But the horse added, "Come, weep not. After all, 'tis not a task, but a trifle." Then they went along by the sea, and the horse said to him, "Let me out to graze, and then keep watch till thou seest a crab come forth from the sea, and then say to him, 'I'll catch thee.'" So Tremsin let his horse out to graze, and then himself stood by the seashore, and watched till he saw a crab come swimming along. Then he said to the crab, "I'll catch thee." "Oh, seize me not," said the crab, "but let me get back to the sea, and I will be of great service to thee." "Very well," said Tremsin, "but thou must get me from the sea the coral necklace of the thrice lovely Nastasia." And with that he let the crab go back into the sea. Then the crab called together all her young crabs, and they collected all the coral and brought it ashore and gave it to Tremsin. Then the faithful steed came running up, and Tremsin mounted it and took the coral to the thrice lovely Nastasia. "Well," said Nastasia, "thou hast got the feather of the bird Tsar. Thou hast got the bird Tsar itself. Thou hast got me my coral. Get me now from the sea my herd of wild horses." Then Tremsin was sore distressed, and went to his faithful steed and wept bitterly and told him all about it. "Well," said the horse, "this time 'tis no trifle, but a real hard task. Go now to thy master, and bid him buy 20 hides, and 20 poods of pitch, and 20 poods of flax, and 20 poods of hair." Footnote: a pood, 40 pounds. End of footnote. So Tremsin went to his master and told him, and his master bought it all. Then Tremsin loaded his horse with all this, and to the sea they went together. And when they came to the sea, the horse said, "Now, lay upon me the hides and the tar and the flax, and lay them in this order, first a hide, then a pood of tar, then a pood of flax, and so on, laying them thus till they are all laid." Tremsin did so. "And now," said the horse, "I shall plunge into the sea, and when thou seest a large red wave driving toward the shore, run away till the red wave has passed, and thou dost see a white wave coming, and then sit down on the shore and keep watch. I shall then come out of the sea, and after me the whole herd. Then thou must strike with the horsehair the horse which gallops immediately after me, and he will not be too strong for thee." So the faithful steed plunged into the sea, and Tremsin sat down on the shore and watched. The horse swam to a bosquet that rose out of the sea, and there the herd of seahorses was grazing. When the strong charger of Nastasia saw him and the hides he carried on his back, it set off after him at full tilt, while the whole herd followed the strong charger of Nastasia. They drove the horse with the hides into the sea and pursued him. Then the strong charger of Nastasia caught up with the steed of Tremsin and tore off one of his hides and began to worry it with his teeth and tear it up into fragments as he ran. Then he caught him up a second time and tore off another hide and began to worry that in a like manner till he tore it also to shreds. And thus he ran after Tremsin's steed for 70 miles, till he had tore off all the hides and worried them to bits. But Tremsin sat upon the seashore till he saw the large white billow bounding in, and behind the billow came his own horse, and behind his own horse came the thrice terrible charger of the thrice lovely Nastasia, with the whole herd at his heels. Tremsin struck him full on the forehead with the 20 poods of hair, and immediately he stood stock still. Then Tremsin threw a halter over him, mounted, and drove the whole herd to the thrice lovely Nastasia. Nastasia praised Tremsin for his prowess, and said to him, "Well, thou hast got the feather of the bird Tsar, thou hast got the bird Tsar itself, thou hast got me my coral and my herd of horses, now milk my mare and put the milk into 3 vats, so that there may be milk hot as boiling water in the first vat, lukewarm milk in the second vat, and icy cold milk in the third vat." Then Tremsin went to his faithful steed, and wept bitterly, and the horse said to him, "Wherefore dost thou weep?" "Why should I not weep?" he cried. "The thrice lovely Nastasia has given me a task to do that cannot be done. I am to fill 3 vats with the milk from her mare, and the milk must be boiling hot in the first vat, lukewarm in the second vat, and icy cold in the third vat." "Oh," cried the horse, "that is not a task, but a trifle. I'll caress the mare, and then go on nibbling till thou hast milked all 3 vats full." So Tremsin did so. He milked the 3 vats full, and the milk in the first vat was boiling hot, and in the second vat warm, and in the third vat freezing cold. When all was ready, the thrice lovely Nastasia said to Tremsin, "Now leap first of all into the cold vat, and then into the warm vat, and then into the boiling hot vat." Tremsin leaped into the first vat, and leaped out again an old man. He leapt into the second vat, and leaped out again a youth. He leapt into the third vat, but when he leaped out again, he was so young and handsome that no pen can describe it, and no tale can tell of it. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia leaped herself into the vats. She leapt into the first vat, and came out an old woman. She leapt into the second vat, and came out a young maid. But when she leapt out of the third vat, she was so handsome and goodly that no pen can describe it, and no tale can tell of it. Then the thrice lovely Nastasia made the nobleman leap into the vats. He leapt into the first vat and became quite old. He leapt into the second vat and became quite young. He leapt into the third vat and burst into pieces. Then Tremsin took unto himself the thrice lovely Nastasia to wife, and they lived happily together on the nobleman's estate, and the evil servants, they drove right away. End of section 7.
Section 8 of Cossack Fairy Tales. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Serpent Wife. There was once a gentleman who had a laborer who never went about in company. His fellow servants did all they could to make him come with them, and now and then enticed him into the tavern, but they could never get him to stay there long, and he always wandered away by himself through the woods. One day he went strolling about in the forest as usual, far away from any village and the haunts of men, when he came upon a huge serpent, which wriggled straight up to him and said, "I am going to eat thee on the spot." But the laborer, who was used to the loneliness of the forest, replied, "Very well, eat me if thou hast a mind to." Then the serpent said, "Nay, I will not eat thee, only do what I tell thee." And the serpent began to tell the man what he had to do. "Turn back home," it said, "and thou wilt find thy master angry because thou hast tarried so long, and there was none to work for him, so that his corn has to remain standing in the field. Then he will send thee to bring in his sheaves, and I'll help thee. Load the wagon well, but don't take quite all the sheaves from the field. Leave one little sheaf behind. More than that thou needst not leave, but that thou must leave. Then beg thy master to let thee have this little sheaf by way of wages. Take no money from him, but that one little sheaf only. Then, when thy master has given thee this sheaf, burn it, and a fair lady will leap out of it. Take her to wife." The laborer obeyed, and went and worked for his master as the serpent had told him. He went out into the field to bring home his master's corn, and marvelously he managed it. He did all the carrying himself, and loaded the wagon so heavily that it creaked beneath its burden. Then when he had brought home all his master's corn, he begged that he might have the remaining little sheaf for himself. He refused to be rewarded for his smart labor. He would take no money. He wanted nothing for himself, he said, but the little sheaf he had left in the field. So his master let him have the sheaf. Then he went out by himself into the field, burnt the sheaf, just as the serpent had told him, and immediately a lovely lady leapt out of it. The laborer forthwith took and married her, and now he began to look out for a place to build him a hut upon. His master gave him a place where he might build his hut, and his wife helped him so much with the building of it that it seemed to him as if he himself never laid a hand to it. His hut grew up quick as thought, and it contained everything that they wanted. The man could not understand it. He could only walk about and wonder at it. Wherever he looked, there was everything quite spick and span, and ready for use. None in the whole village had a better house than he, and so he might have lived all in peace and prosperity to the end of his days, had not his desires outstripped his deserts. He had 3 fields of standing corn, and when he came home one day, his laborers said to him, "Thy corn is not gathered in yet, though it is standing all ripe on its stalks." Now the season was getting on, and for all the care and labor of his wife, the corn was still standing in the field. "Why, what's the meaning of this?" thought he. Then in his anger he cried, "I see how it is. Once a serpent, always a serpent." He was quite beside himself all the way home, and was very wrath with his wife because of the corn. When he got home, he went straight to his chamber to lie down on his pillow. There was no sign of his wife, but a huge serpent was just coiling itself round and settling down in the middle of the pillow. Then he called to mind how once his wife had said to him, "Beware, for heaven's sake, of ever calling me a serpent. I will not suffer thee to call me by that name, and if thou dost, thou shalt lose thy wife." He called this to mind now, but it was already too late. What he had said could not be unsaid. Then he reflected what a good wife he had had, and how she herself had sought him out, and how she had waited upon him continually and done him boundless good, and yet he had not been able to refrain his tongue, so that now, maybe, he would be without a wife for the rest of his days. His heart grew heavy within him as he thought of all this, and he wept bitterly at the harm he had done to himself. Then the serpent said to him, "Weep no more. What is to be must be. Is it thy standing corn thou art grieved about? Go up to thy barn, and there thou wilt find all thy corn lying, to the very last little grain. Have I not brought it all home and threshed it for thee, and set everything in order? And now I must depart to the place where thou didst first find me." Then she crept off, and the man followed her, weeping and mourning all the time, as for one already dead. When they reached the forest, she stopped and coiled herself round and round beneath a hazelnut bush. Then she said to the man, "Now kiss me once, but see to it that I do not bite thee." Then he kissed her once, and she wound herself round a branch of a tree and asked him, "What dost thou feel within thee?" He answered, "At the moment when I kissed thee, it seemed to me as if I knew everything that was going on in the world." Then she said to him again, "Kiss me a second time. And what dost thou feel now?" she asked when he had kissed her again. "Now," said he, "I understand all languages which are spoken among men." Then she said to him, "And now kiss me a third time, but this will be for the last time." Then he kissed the serpent for the last time, and she said to him, "What dost thou feel now?" "Now," he said, "I know all that is going on under the earth." "Go now," said she, "to the Tsar, and he will give thee his daughter for the knowledge thou hast. But pray to God for poor me, for now I must be and remain a serpent forever." And with that the serpent uncoiled herself and disappeared among the bushes. But the man went away and wedded the Tsar's daughter. End of Section 8. Section 9 of Cossack Fairy Tales. The Story of Unlucky Daniel. There was once upon a time a youth called Unlucky Dan. Wherever he went and whatever he did, and with whomsoever he served, nothing came of it. All his labor was like spilt water, and he got no good from it. One day he took service with a new master. "I'll serve thee a whole year," said he, "for a piece of sown wheat land." His master agreed, and he entered into his service, and at the same time he sowed his piece of wheat land. His wheat shot up rapidly. When his master's wheat was in the stalk, his was already in the ear, and when his master's wheat was in the ear, his own wheat was already ripe. "I'll reap it tomorrow," thought he. The same night a cloud arose, the hail poured down and destroyed his wheat altogether. Daniel fell a-weeping. "I'll go serve another master," he cried. "Perhaps God will then prosper me." So he went to another master. "I'll serve thee for a whole year," said he, "if thou wilt give me that wild colt." So he stopped and served him, and by the end of the year he trained the wild colt so well that he made a carriage horse out of it. "Oh ho," thought he, "I shall take away something with me this time." The same night the wolves made an inroad upon the stables and tore the horse to pieces. Daniel fell a-weeping. "I'll go to another master," said he. "Perhaps I shall be luckier there." So he went to a third master, and on this master's tomb lay a large stone. Whence it came none knew, and it was so heavy that none could move it, though they tried for ages. "I'll serve thee a year," said he, "for that stone." The master agreed, and he entered his service. Then a change came over the stone, and divers flowers began to grow upon it. On one side they were red, on the second side silver, and on the third side golden. "Oh," thought Daniel, "that stone at any rate will soon be mine. Nobody can move it." But the next morning a thunderbolt descended and struck the stone, and shivered it to atoms. Then Daniel fell a-weeping, and lamented that God had given him nothing, though he had served for so many years. But the people said to him, "Listen now, thou that art so unlucky. Why dost thou not go to the Tsar? He is the father of us all, and will therefore certainly care for thee." So he listened to them and went, and the Tsar gave him a place at his court. One day the Tsar said to him, "I marvel that thou art so unlucky, for do whatsoever thou wilt, thou art none the better for it. I would fain requite thee for all thy labors." Then he took and filled 3 barrels, the first with gold, and the second with coal, and the third with sand, and said to Daniel, "Look now, if thou dost pitch upon that which is filled with gold, thou shalt be a Tsar. If thou dost choose the one that is filled with coal, thou shalt be a blacksmith. But if thou dost pick out the one that is full of sand, why then thou art indeed hopelessly unlucky, and out of my tsardom thou must go straightway. Yet I will give thee a horse and armor to take along with thee." So Daniel was brought to the place where there were the 3 barrels, and went about them and felt them one after the other. "This one is full of gold," said he. They broke it open, and it was full of sand. "Well," said the Tsar, "I see that thou art hopelessly unlucky. Depart from my tsardom, for I have no need at all of such as thou." Then he gave him a charger and armor, and the full equipment of a Cossack, and sent him away. He went on for a whole day. He went on for a second day, and there was nothing to eat, either for his horse or himself. He went for a third day, and in the distance he saw a haycock. "That will do for my horse, at any rate," thought he, "even if it isn't of no good to me." So he went up to it, and immediately it burst into flames. Daniel began to weep, when he heard a voice crying piteously, "Save me, I am burning." "How can I save thee," he cried, "when I myself cannot draw near?" "Oh, give me thy weapon," cried the voice, "and I'll seize hold of it, and then thou canst pull me out." So he stretched forth his weapon, and drew forth a goodly serpent, such as is only known of in old folk songs. And she said to him, "Since thou hast drawn me out, thou must also take me home." "How shall I carry thee?" asked he. "Carry me on thy horse, and in whatsoever direction I turn my head and his, thither go." So he took her upon his horse, and they went on till they came to a court so splendid that it was a delight to look at it. Then she glided down from his charger and said, "Wait here, and I'll soon be with thee again." And with that she wriggled under the gate. He stood there, and stood and waited till he wept from sheer weariness. But at last she came out again in the shape of a lovely damsel in gorgeous raiment, and opened the gate for him. "Lead in thy horse," said she, "and eat and rest a while." So they went into the courtyard, and in the midst of it stood 2 springs. The lady drew out of one of these springs a little glass of water, and strewing a handful of oats beside it, said, "Fasten up thy horse here." "What?" thought he. "For these 3 days we have had naught to eat or drink, and now she mocks us with a handful of oats." Then they went together to the guest chamber, and she gave him there a little glass of water, and a small piece of wheaten bread. "Why, what is this for a hungry man like me?" thought he. But when he chanced to glance through the window, he saw that the whole courtyard was full of oats and water, and that his horse had already eaten its fill. Then he nibbled his little piece of wheaten bread, and sipped his water, and his hunger was immediately satisfied. "Well," said the lady, "hast thou eaten thy fill?" "That I have," he replied. "Then lie down and rest a while," said she. And the next morning when he rose up, she said to him, "Give me thy horse, thy armor, and thy raiment, and I'll give thee mine in exchange." Then she gave him her shift and her weapon, and said, "This sword is of such a sort that if thou do but wave it, all men will fall down before thee. And as for this shift, when thou hast it on, none will be able to seize thee. And now go on thy way till thou come to an inn, and there they will tell thee that the Tsar of that land is seeking warriors. Go and offer thyself to him, and thou shalt marry his daughter, but tell her not the truth for 7 years." Then they took leave of each other, and he departed. He came to the inn, and there they asked him whence he came. And when they knew that he came from a strange land, they said to him, "A strange people has attacked our Tsar, and he cannot defend himself, for a mighty warrior has conquered his tsardom and carried off his daughter, and worries him to death." "Show me the way to your Tsar," said Daniel. Then they showed him, and he went. When he came to the Tsar, he said to him, "I will subdue this strange land for thee. All the army I want is a couple of Cossacks, but they must be picked men." Then the heralds went through the tsardom till they had found these 2 Cossacks, and Daniel went forth with them into the endless steppes, and there he bade them lie down and sleep while he kept watch. And while they slept, the army of the strange country came upon them, and cried to Daniel to turn back if he would escape destruction. And then they began to fire with their guns and cannons, and they fired so many balls that the bodies of the 2 Cossacks were quite covered by them. Then Daniel waved his sword and smote, and only those whom his blows did not reach escaped alive. So he vanquished them all, and conquered that strange land, and came back and married the Tsar's daughter, and they lived happily together. But counselors from the strange land whispered dark sayings in the ears of the Tsarivna. "What is this fellow that thou hast taken to thyself? Who is he, and whence? Find out for us wherein lies his strength, that we may destroy him and take thee away." Then she began asking him, and he said to her, "Look now, all my strength is in these gloves." Then she waited till he was asleep, and drew them off him, and gave them to the people from the strange land. And the next day he went hunting, and the evil counselors surrounded and shot at him with their darts, and beat him with the gloves. But it was all in vain. Then he waved his sword, and whomsoever he struck fell to the ground, and he clapped them all in prison. But his wife caressed and wheedled him again, and said, "Nay, but tell me, wherein doth thy strength lie?" "My strength, darling," said he, "lies in my boots." Then she drew off his boots while he slept, and gave them to his enemies, and they fell upon him again as he went out. But again he waved his sword, and as many as he struck fell to the ground, and he put them all in prison. Then his wife wheedled and caressed him the 3rd time. "Nay, but tell me, darling," quoth she, "wherein doth thy strength lie?" Then he was wearied with her beseeching, and said to her, "My strength lies in this sword of mine, and in my shirt, and so long as I have this shirt on, nobody can touch me." Then she caressed and fondled him, and said, "Thou shouldst take a bath, my darling, and well wash thyself. My father always did so." So he let himself be persuaded, and no sooner had he undressed than she changed all his clothes for others, and gave his sword and his shirt to his enemies. Then he came out of his bath, and immediately they fell upon him, and cut him to pieces, put him in a sack, placed him on his horse, and let the horse go where it would. So the horse went on, and wandered farther and farther, till it came to the old place where he had stayed with the serpent lady. And when his benefactress saw him, she said, "Why, if poor unlucky Daniel hasn't fallen into a scrape again." And immediately she took him out of the sack, and fitted his pieces together, and washed them clean, and took healing water from one of the springs, and living water from the other, and sprinkled him all over, and he stood there sound and strong again. "Now did I not bid thee tell not thy wife the truth for 7 years?" said she, "and thou wouldst not take heed." And then he stood there, and spoke never a word. "Well, now, rest a while," she continued, "for thou dost need it, and then I'll give thee something else." So the next day she gave him a chain, and said to him, "Listen, Go to that inn where thou didst go before, and early next morning, whilst thou art bathing, bid the innkeeper beat thee with all his might on the back with this chain, and so thou wilt get back to thy wife, but tell her not a word of what has happened. So we went to the same inn, and passed the night there. And on the morrow he called the innkeeper, and said to him, Look now, the first time I dip my head in the water, beat me about the back with this chain as hard as thou canst. So the innkeeper waited till he had ducked his head under the water, and then he thrashed him with the chain, whereupon he turned into a horse so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. The innkeeper was so glad, so glad. So I've got rid of one guest only to get another one, thought he. He lost no time in taking the horse to the fair and offered it for sale. And among those who saw it was the Tsar himself. What dost thou ask for it? Said the Tsar. I ask 5,000 rubles. Then the Tsar counted down the money and took the horse away. When he got to his court, he made a great to-do about his beautiful horse, and cried to his daughter, Come and see, dear little heart, what a fine horse I have bought. Then she came forth to look at it, but the moment she saw it, she cried, That horse will be my ruin. Thou must kill it on the spot. Nay, dear little heart, how can I do such a thing? Said the Tsar. Slay it thou must, and slay it thou shalt, cried the Tsarivna. So they sent for a knife and began sharpening it, when one of the maidens of the court took pity on the horse and cried, O my good, my darling horse, so lovely as thou art, and yet to kill thee. But the horse neighed and went to her and said, Look now, take the first drop of blood which flows from me, and bury it in the garden. Then they slew the horse, but the maiden did as she was told, and took the drop of blood and buried it in the garden. And from this drop of blood there sprang up a cherry tree, and its first leaf was golden, and its second leaf was a richer color still, and its third leaf was yet another color, and every leaf upon it was different to the others. One day the Tsar went out walking in his garden, and when he saw this cherry tree, he fell in love with it, and praised it to his daughter. Look, said he, what a beauteous cherry tree we have in our garden. Who can tell whence it sprung? But the moment the Tsarivna saw it, she cried, That tree will be my ruin. Thou must cut it down. Nay, said he, how can I cut down the fairest ornament of my garden? Down it must come, and down it shall come, replied the Tsarivna. Then they sent for an axe and made ready to cut it down. But the damsel came running up and said, O darling little cherry tree, so fair thou art. From a horse thou hast sprung, and now they will fell thee before thou hast lived a day. Never mind, said the cherry tree, take the first chip that falls from me and throw it into the water. Then they cut down the cherry tree. But the girl did as she was bidden, and threw the first chip from the cherry tree into the water, and out of it swam a drake so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. Then the Tsar went a-hunting, and saw it swimming in the water, and it was so close that he could touch it with his hand. The Tsar took off his clothes and plunged into the water after it, and it enticed him farther and farther away from the shore. Then the drake swam toward the spot where the Tsar had left his clothes, and when it came up to them, it changed into a man, and put them on, and behold, the man was Daniel. Then he called the Tsar, Swim hither, swim hither. The Tsar swam up, but when he swam ashore, Daniel met and killed him. And after that he went back to court in the Tsar's clothes. Then all the courtiers hailed him as the Tsar, but he said, Where is that damsel who was here just now? They brought her instantly before him. Well, said he to her, thou hast been a second mother to me, and now thou shalt be my second wife. So he lived with her and was happy. But he caused his first wife to be tied to the tails of wild horses, and torn to pieces in the endless steppes. End of Section 9. Section 10 of Cossack Fairy Tales. A sparrow once flew down upon a bush and said, Little bush, give good little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the little bush. Then the sparrow was angry and went to the goat and said, Goat, goat, nibble bush, bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the goat. Then the sparrow went to the wolf and said, Wolf, wolf, eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the wolf. Then the sparrow went to the people and said, Good people, kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. We won't, said the people. Then the sparrow went to the Tartars and said, Tartars, Tartars, slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. But the Tartars said, We won't slay the people. And the people said, We won't kill the wolf. And the wolf said, I won't eat the goat. And the goat said, I won't nibble the bush. And the bush said, I won't give the good little sparrow a swing. Go, said the bush to the fire, for the Tartars won't slay the people, and the people won't kill the wolf, and the wolf won't eat the goat, and the goat won't nibble the bush, and the bush won't give the dear little sparrow a swing. But the fire also said, I won't. They were all alike. Go to the water, said he. So the sparrow went to the water and said, Come, water, quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give good little sparrow a swing. But the water also said, I won't. So the sparrow went to the ox and said, Ox, ox, drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the ox. Then the sparrow went to the poleaxe and said, Poleaxe, poleaxe, strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the poleaxe. So the sparrow went to the worms and said, Worms, worms, not poleaxe. Poleaxe won't strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. We won't, said the worms. Then the sparrow went to the hen and said, Hen, hen, peck worms. Worms won't gnaw poleaxe. Poleaxe won't strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. I won't, said the hen. But go to the sparrowhawk. He ought to give the first push. Or why is he called the pusher? Footnote. Shulyak means both sparrowhawk and push. End footnote. So the sparrow went to the sparrowhawk and said, Come, pusher, seize hen. Hen won't peck worms. Worms won't gnaw poleaxe. Poleaxe won't strike ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn Tartars. Tartars won't slay people. People won't kill wolf. Wolf won't eat goat. Goat won't nibble bush. Bush won't give little sparrow a swing. Then the sparrowhawk began to seize the hen. The hen began to peck the worms began to gnaw the poleaxe began to hit the ox began to drink the water began to quench the fire began to burn the Tartars began to slay the people began to kill the wolf began to eat the goat began to nibble the bush, and the bush cried out, swing away, swing, little Daddy Sparrow, have your fling. End of section 10.
Section 11 of Cossack Fairy Tales. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Old Dog. There was once a man who had a dog. While the dog was young, he was made much of, but when he grew old, he was driven out of doors. So he went and lay outside the fence, and a wolf came up to him and said, Doggy, why so down in the mouth? While I was young, said the dog, they made much of me, but now that I am old, they beat me. The wolf said, I see thy master in the field. Go after him, and perchance he'll give thee something. Nay, said the dog, they won't even let me walk about the fields now, they only beat me. Look now, said the wolf, I'm sorry, and will make things better for thee. Thy mistress, I see, has put her child down beneath that wagon. I'll seize it, and make off with it. Run thou after me and bark, and though thou hast no teeth left, tussle me as much as thou canst, so that thy mistress may see it. So the wolf seized the child, and ran away with it, and the dog ran after him and began to tuzzle him. His mistress saw it, and made after them with a harrow, crying at the same time, "Husband! Husband! The wolf has got the child! Gabriel! Gabriel, don't you see? The wolf has got the child!" Then the man chased the wolf and got back the child. "Brave old dog," said he. "You are old and toothless, and yet you can give help in time of need, and will not let your master's child be stolen." And henceforth the woman and her husband gave the old dog a large lump of bread every day. End of Section 11. Section 12 of Cossack Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Devorah Allen. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Fox and the Cat. In a certain forest there once lived a fox, and near to the fox lived a man who had a cat that had been a good mouser in its youth, but was now old and half blind. The man didn't want puss any longer, but not liking to kill it, took it out into the forest and lost it there. Then the fox came up and said, "Why, Mr. Shaggy Matthew, how do you do? What brings you here?" "Alas," said Pussy, "my master loved me as long as I could bite, but now that I can bite no longer and have left off catching mice, and I used to catch them finely once, he doesn't like to kill me, but he has left me in the wood where I must perish miserably." "No, dear Pussy," said the fox. "You leave it to me, and I'll help you to get your daily bread." "You are very good, dear little sister Foxy," said the cat, and the fox built him a little shed with a garden round it to walk about in. Now one day the hare came to steal the man's cabbage. "Cream, cream, cream!" he squeaked. But the cat popped his head out of the window, and when he saw the hare he put up his back and stuck up his tail and said, "Frrrr." The hare was frightened and ran away and told the bear, the wolf, and the wild boar all about it. "Never mind," said the bear. "I tell you what, we'll all four give a banquet, and invite the fox and the cat and do for the pair of them. Now look here, I'll steal the man's mead, and you, Mr. Wolf, steal his fat pot, and you, Mr. Wild Boar, root up his fruit trees, and you, Mr. Bunny, go and invite the fox and the cat to dinner." So they made everything ready as the bear had said, and the hare ran off to invite the guests. He came beneath the window and said, "We invite your little ladyship Foxy Woxy, together with Mr. Shaggy Matthew to dinner." And back he ran again. "But you should have told them to bring their spoons with them," said the bear. "Oh, what a head I've got! If I didn't quite forget!" cried the hare, and back he went again, ran beneath the window and cried, "Mind you bring your spoons!" "Very well," said the fox. So the cat and the fox went to the banquet, and when the cat saw the bacon, he put up his back and stuck out his tail and cried, "Mew, mew," with all his might. But they thought he said, "Mallow, mallow." Footnote. What a little, what a little. End of footnote. "What?" said the bear, who was hiding behind the beeches with the other beasts. "Here have we four been getting together all we could, and this pig-faced cat calls it too little? What a monstrous cat he must be to have such an appetite!" So they were all four very frightened, and the bear ran up a tree, and the others hid where they could. But when the cat saw the boar's bristles sticking out from behind the bushes, he thought it was a mouse, and put up his back again and cried, "Frrrr." Then they were more frightened than ever, and the boar went into a bush still farther off, and the wolf went behind an oak, and the bear got down from the tree and climbed up into a bigger one, and the hare ran right away. But the cat remained in the midst of all the good things and ate away at the bacon, and the little fox gobbled up the honey, and they ate and ate till they couldn't eat any more, and then they both went home licking their paws. End of Section 12.
Section 13 of Cossack Fairy Tales. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Straw Ox. There was once upon a time an old man and an old woman. The old man worked in the fields as a pitch burner, while the old woman sat at home and spun flax. They were so poor that they could save nothing at all. All their earnings went in bare food, and when that was gone, there was nothing left. At last the old woman had a good idea. "Look now, husband," cried she, Make me a straw ox, and smear it all over with tar." "Why, you foolish woman," said he, "what's the good of an ox of that sort?" "Never mind," said she, "you just make it. I know what I am about." What was the poor man to do? He set to work and made the ox of straw, and smeared it all over with tar. The night passed away, and at early dawn the old woman took her distaff, and drove the straw ox out into the steppe to graze, and she herself sat down behind a hillock, and began spinning her flax, and cried, "Graze away, little ox, while I spin my flax. Graze away, little ox, while I spin my flax." And while she spun, her head drooped down, and she began to doze. And while she was dozing, from behind the dark wood and from the back of the huge pines, a bear came rushing out upon the ox and said, "Who are you? Speak and tell me." And the ox said, "A 3-year-old heifer am I, made of straw and smeared with tar." "Oh," said the bear, "stuffed with straw and trimmed with tar, are you? Then give me of your straw and tar, that I may patch up my ragged fur again." "Take some," said the ox, and the bear fell upon him and began to tear away at the tar. He tore and buried his teeth in it till he found he couldn't let go again. He tugged and he tugged, but it was no good, and the ox dragged him gradually off goodness knows where. Then the old woman awoke, and there was no ox to be seen. "Alas, old fool that I am," cried she, "perchance it has gone home." Then she quickly caught up her distaff and spinning board, threw them over her shoulders, and hastened off home. And she saw that the ox had dragged the bear up to the fence, and in she went to the old man. "Dad, Dad," she cried, "look, look, the ox has brought us a bear. Come out and kill it." And the old man jumped up, tore off the bear, tied him up, and threw him in the cellar. Next morning, between dark and dawn, the old woman took her distaff and drove the ox into the steppe to graze. She herself sat down by a mound, began spinning, and said, "Graze, graze away, little ox, while I spin my flax. Graze, graze away, little ox, while I spin my flax." And while she spun, her head drooped down, and she dozed. And lo, from behind the dark wood, from the back of the huge pines, a gray wolf came rushing out upon the ox and said, "Who are you? Come, tell me." "I am a 3-year-old heifer, stuffed with straw and trimmed with tar," said the ox. "Oh, trimmed with tar, are you? Then give me of your tar to tar my sides, that the dogs and the sons of dogs tear me not." "Take some," said the ox. And with that the wolf fell upon him and tried to tear the tar off. He tugged and tore with his teeth, but could get none off. Then he tried to let go and couldn't. Tug and worry as he might, it was no good. When the old woman woke, there was no heifer in sight. "Maybe my heifer has gone home," she cried. "I'll go home and see." When she got there, she was astonished, for by the palings stood the ox with the wolf still tugging at it. She ran and told her old man, and her old man came and threw the wolf into the cellar also. On the 3rd day, the old woman again drove her ox into the pastures to graze, and sat down by a mound and dozed off. Then a fox came running up. "Who are you?" it asked the ox. "I'm a 3-year-old heifer, stuffed with straw and daubed with tar." "Then give me some of your tar to smear my sides with, when those dogs and sons of dogs tear my hide." "Take some," said the ox. Then the fox fastened her teeth in him and couldn't draw them out again. The old woman told her old man, and he took and cast the fox into the cellar in the same way. And after that they caught Pussy Swiftfoot, footnote the hare, end footnote, likewise. So when he had got them all safely, the old man sat down on a bench before the cellar and began sharpening a knife. And the bear said to him, "Tell me, Daddy, what are you sharpening your knife for?" to flay your skin off, that I may make a leather jacket for myself and a pelisse for my old wife. Oh, don't flay me, daddy dear. Rather let me go, and I'll bring you a lot of honey. Very well, see you do it. And he unbound and let the bear go. Then he sat down on the bench, and again began sharpening his knife. And the wolf asked him, Daddy, what are you sharpening your knife for? To flay off your skin, that I may make me a warm cap against the winter. Oh, don't flay me, daddy dear, and I'll bring you a whole herd of little sheep. Well, see that you do it. And he let the wolf go. Then he sat down and began sharpening his knife again. The fox put out her little snout and asked him, Be so kind, dear daddy, and tell me why you are sharpening your knife. Little foxes, said the old man, have nice skins that do capitally for collars and trimmings, and I want to skin you. Oh, don't take my skin away, daddy dear, and I will bring you hens and geese. Very well, see that you do it. And he let the fox go. The hare now alone remained, and the old man began sharpening his knife on the hare's account. Why do you do that? Asked Puss, and he replied, Little hares have nice, little soft, warm skins, which will make me gloves and mittens against the winter. Oh, daddy dear, don't flay me, and I'll bring you kale and good cauliflower, if only you let me go. Then he let the hare go also. Then they went to bed, but very early in the morning, when it was neither dusk nor dawn, there was a noise in the doorway, like "Durr!" "Daddy!" cried the old woman, "there's someone scratching at the door. Go and see who it is." The old man went out, and there was the bear carrying a whole hive full of honey. The old man took the honey from the bear, but no sooner did he lie down than again there was another "Durr!" at the door. The old man looked out and saw the wolf driving a whole flock of sheep into the yard. Close on his heels came the fox, driving before him geese and hens, and all manner of fowls. And last of all came the hare, bringing cabbage and kale and all manner of good food. And the old man was glad, and the old woman was glad, and the old man sold the sheep and oxen, and got so rich that he needed nothing more. As for the straw-stuffed ox, it stood in the sun till it fell to pieces. End of Section 13. Section 14 of Cossack Fairy Tales. Cossack Fairy Tales by Robert Nisbet Bain. The Golden Slipper. There was once upon a time an old man and an old woman, and the old man had a daughter, and the old woman had a daughter. And the old woman said to the old man, Go and buy a heifer, that thy daughter may have something to look after. So the old man went to the fair and bought a heifer. Now the old woman spoiled her own daughter, but was always snapping at the old man's daughter. Yet the old man's daughter was a good, hard-working girl, while as for the old woman's daughter, she was but an idle slut. She did nothing but sit down all day with her hands in her lap. One day the old woman said to the old man's daughter, Look now, thou doubter of a dog, go and drive out the heifer to graze. Here thou hast 2 bundles of flax. See that thou unravel it, and reel it, and bleach it, and bring it home all ready in the evening. Then the girl took the flax, and drove the heifer out to graze. So the heifer began to graze, but the girl sat down and began to weep. And the heifer said to her, Tell me, dear little maiden, wherefore dost thou weep? Alas, why should I not weep? My stepmother has given me this flax, and bidden me unravel it, and reel it, and bleach it, and bring it back as cloth in the evening. Grieve not, maiden, said the heifer, it will all turn out well. Lie down to sleep. So she lay down to sleep, and when she awoke the flax was all unraveled and reeled and spun into fine cloth and bleached. Then she drove the heifer home, and gave the cloth to her stepmother. The old woman took it and hid it away, that nobody might know that the old man's daughter had brought it to her. The next day she said to her own daughter, "Dear little daughter, drive the heifer out to graze, and here is a little piece of flax for thee. Unravel it, and reel it, or unravel it not, and reel it not, as thou likest best, but bring it home with thee." Then she drove the heifer out to graze, and threw herself down in the grass and slept the whole day, and did not even take the trouble to go and moisten the flax in the cooling stream. And in the evening she drove the heifer back from the field, and gave her mother the flax. "Oh, mammy," she said, "my head ached so the whole day, and the sun scorched so that I couldn't go down to the stream to moisten the flax." "Never mind," said her mother, "lie down and sleep. It will do for another day." And the next day she called the old man's daughter again. "Get up, thou daughter of a dog, and take the heifer out to graze. And here thou hast a bundle of raw flax. Unravel it, heckle it, wind it on to thy spindles, bleach it, weave with it, and make it into fine cloth for me by the evening." Then the girl drove out the heifer to graze. The heifer began grazing, but she sat down beneath a willow tree and threw her flax down beside her, and began weeping with all her might. But the heifer came up to her and said, "Tell me, little maiden, wherefore dost thou weep?" "Why should I not weep?" said she, and she told the heifer all about it. "Grieve not," said the heifer, "it will all come right, but lie down to sleep." So she lay down and immediately fell asleep. And by evening the bundle of raw flax was heckled and spun and reeled, and the cloth was woven and bleached so that one could have made shirts of it straight off. Then she drove the heifer home, and gave the cloth to her stepmother. Then the old woman said to herself, "How comes it that this daughter of the son of the dog has done all her tasks so easily? The heifer must have got it done for her, I know. But I'll put a stop to all this, thou daughter of the son of a dog," said she. Then she went to the old man and said, "Father, kill and cut to pieces this heifer of thine, for because of it thy daughter does not a stroke of work. She drives the heifer out to graze, and goes to sleep the whole day and does nothing." "Then I'll kill it," said he. But the old man's daughter heard what he said, and went into the garden and began to weep bitterly. The heifer came to her and said, "Tell me, dear little maiden, wherefore dost thou weep?" "Why should I not weep," she said, "when they want to kill thee?" "Don't grieve," said the heifer, "it will all come right. When they have killed me, ask thy stepmother to give thee my entrails to wash, and in them thou wilt find a grain of corn. Plant this grain of corn, and out of it will grow up a willow tree, and whatever thou dost want, go to this willow tree, and ask, and thou shalt have thy heart's desire." Then her father slew the heifer, and she went to her stepmother and said, "Prithee, let me have the entrails of the heifer to wash." And her stepmother answered, "As if I would let anybody else do such work but thee." Then she went and washed them, and sure enough she found the grain of corn, planted it by the porch, trod down the earth, and watered it a little. And the next morning, when she awoke, she saw that a willow tree had sprung out of this grain of corn, and beneath the willow tree was a spring of water, and no better water was to be found anywhere in the whole village. It was as cold and clear as ice. When Sunday came around, the old woman tricked her pet daughter out finely, and took her to church. But to the old man's daughter she said, "Look to the fire, thou slut! Keep a good fire burning, and get ready the dinner, and make everything in the house neat and tidy, and have thy best frock on, and all the shirts washed against I come back from church. And if thou hast not all these things done, thou shalt say good-bye to dear life." So the old woman and her daughter went to church, and the smart little stepdaughter made the fire burn up, and got the dinner ready, and then went to the willow tree and said, willow tree, come out of thy bark. Lady Anna, come when I call thee." Then the willow tree did its duty, and shook all its leaves, and a noble lady came forth from it. "Dear little lady, sweet little lady, what are thy commands?" said she. "Give me," said she, a grand dress, and let me have a carriage and horses, for I would go to God's house." And immediately she was dressed in silk and satin, with golden slippers on her feet, and the carriage came up, and she went to church. When she entered the church, there was a great to-do, and everyone said, "Oh, oh, oh, who is it? Is it perchance some princess or some queen? For the like of it we have never seen before." Now the young Tsarevich chanced to be in the church at that time. When he saw her, his heart began to beat. He stood there and could not take his eyes off her. And all the great captains and courtiers marveled at her and fell in love with her straightway. But who she was they knew not. When service was over, she got up and drove away. When she got home, she took off all her fine things and put on all her rags again, and sat in the window corner and watched the folk coming from church. Then her stepmother came back too. "Is the dinner ready?" said she. "Yes, it is ready." "Hast thou sewn the shirts?" "Yes, the shirts are sewn too." Then they sat down to meat, and began to relate how they had seen such a beautiful young lady at church. "The Tsarevich," said the old woman, instead of saying his prayers, was looking at her all the while, so goodly was she. Then she said to the old man's daughter, "As for thee, thou slut, though thou hast sewn the shirts and bleached them, thou art but a dirty underwench." On the following Sunday, the stepmother again dressed up her daughter, and took her to church. But before she went, she said to the old man's daughter, "See that thou keep the fire in, thou slut." And she gave her a lot of work to do. The old man's daughter very soon did it all. And then she went to the willow tree and said, "Bright spring willow, bright spring willow, change thee, transform thee." Then still statelier dames stepped forth from the willow tree. "Dear little lady, sweet little lady, what commands hast thou to give?" She told them what she wanted, and they gave her a gorgeous dress, and put golden shoes on her feet, and she went to church in a grand carriage. The Tsarevich was again there, and at the sight of her he stood as if rooted to the ground, and couldn't take his eyes from her. Then the people began to whisper, "Is there none here who knows her? Is there none who knows who such a handsome lady may be?" And they began to ask each other, "Dost thou know her? Dost thou know her?" But the Tsarevich said, "Whoever will tell me who this great lady is, to him will I give a sackload of gold ducats." Then they inquired, and laid all their heads together, but nothing came of it. But the Tsarevich had a jester, who was always with him, and used always to jest and cut capers whenever this child of the Tsar was sad. So now, too, he began to laugh at the young Tsarevich, and say to him, "I know how to find out who this fine lady is." "How?" asked the young Tsarevich. "I'll tell thee," said the jester. "Smear with pitch the place in church where she is wont to stand. Then her slippers will stick to it, and she, in her hurry to get away, will never notice that she has left them behind her in church." So the Tsarevich ordered his courtiers to smear the spot with pitch straight away. Next time, when the service was over, she got up as usual and hastened away, but left her golden slippers behind her. When she got home, she took off her costly raiment and put on her rags and waited in the window corner till they came from church. When they came from church, they had all sorts of things to talk about, and how the young Tsarevich had fallen in love with the grand young lady, and how they were unable to tell him whence she came, or who she was. And the stepmother hated the old man's daughter all the more because she had done her work so nicely. But the Tsarevich did nothing but pine away, and they proclaimed throughout the kingdom, "Who has lost a pair of golden slippers?" But none could tell. Then the Tsar sent his wise counselors throughout the kingdom to find her. "If ye do not find her," said he, "it will be the death of my child, and then ye also are dead men." So the Tsar's counselors went through all the towns and villages, and measured the feet of all the maidens against the golden slippers, and she was to be the bride of the Tsarevich, whom the golden slippers fitted. They went to the houses of all the princes, and all the nobles, and all the rich merchants, but it was of no avail. The feet of all the maidens were either too little or too large. Then they hied them to the huts of the peasants. They went on and on, they measured, and at last they were so tired that they could scarce draw one foot after the other. Then they looked about them and saw a beautiful willow tree standing by a hut, and beneath the willow tree was a spring of water. "Let us go and rest in the cool shade," said they. So they went and rested, and the old woman came out of the hut to them. "Hast thou a daughter, little mother?" said they. "Yes, that I have," said she. "One or two?" they asked. "Well, there's another," said she, "but she is not my daughter. She is a mere kitchen slut. The very look of her is nasty." "Very well," said they. "We will measure them with the golden slippers." "Good," cried the old woman. Then she said to her own daughter, "Go, my dear little daughter, tidy thyself up a bit, and wash thy little feet." But the old man's daughter she drove behind the stove, and the poor thing was neither washed nor dressed. "Sit there, thou daughter of a dog," said she. Then the Tsar's counselors came into the hut to measure, and the old woman said to her daughter, "Put out thy little foot, darling." The counselors then measured with the slippers, but they wouldn't fit her at all. Then they said, "Tell us, little mother, where is thy other daughter?" "Oh, as for her, she is a mere slut, and besides, she isn't dressed." "No matter," said they. "Where is she?" Then she came out from behind the stove, and her stepmother hustled her and said, "Get along, thou sluttish hussy." Then they measured her with the slippers, and they fitted like gloves, whereupon the courtiers rejoiced exceedingly and praised the Lord. "Well, little mother," said they, "we will take this daughter away with us." "What, take a slattern like that? Why, all the people will laugh at you." "Maybe they will," said they. Then the old woman scolded, and wouldn't let her go. "How can such a slut become the consort of the Tsar's son?" screeched she. "Nay, but she must come," said they. "Go dress thyself, maiden." "Wait but a moment," said she, "and I'll tire myself as is meet." Then she went to the spring beneath the willow tree, and washed and dressed herself, and she came back so lovely and splendid that the like of it can neither be thought of nor guessed at, but only told of in tales. As she entered the hut, she shone like the sun, and her stepmother had not another word to say. So they put her in a carriage and drove off, and when the Tsarevich saw her, he could not contain himself. "Make haste, O my father," cried he, "and give us thy blessing." So the Tsar blessed them, and they were wedded. Then they made a great feast, and invited all the world to it, and they lived happily together, and ate wheat bread to their heart's content. End of section 14.